And let the Planning Commission hearing for Monday, January 27th commence. Commissioner Eggenberger, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Cruz. Here. Commissioner Eggenberger. Here. Commissioner Foster. Patrick, do you have anything to say?
I haven't heard anything, but if I do hear anything, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Singh did let me know ahead of time that he would not be here this evening.
Commissioner Janowski.
Here.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Watkins.
Here.
Commissioner Weber.
Here.
And Chairperson Zuber.
I am here, thank you. Do we have minutes from December 16th? Do I hear any motions for approving those?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by Commissioner Watkins. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good. All right. Oh, I forgot to mention that we have some staff members present. We have Patrick and Aaron from the Planning Department, and we have Attorney Agrusa, and oh my God, I'm totally blanking. John's here too. Thank you.
Just John.
Yes, exactly.
Next thing you know, he'll have his name with this logo.
But then he might go back to John. What? Yes, John Lefevre. Thank you. Okay, very good. So do we have an agenda? Anyone want to move to accept it? Moved. All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Eggenberger and support by Commissioner Lee. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. Patrick, do we have any communications that we should know about?
There were no additional communications for tonight's agenda.
Okay, thank you. And we have a public comment section here. So anybody from the audience like to speak on about something that is not having a public hearing this evening? In other words, if you have anything to say about anything besides Top Canton, the development, please feel free to approach the mic and state your name and address, and it looks like we have none. So let's move on. Old business. We have Top Canton LLC, where we are considering a final plan development district site plan and preliminary condominium for several parcels on Ford Road between Ford and Warren and 275 and lots. The proposed uses are fast food drive-through restaurants, multi-tenant retail, and indoor-outdoor recreation facility / golf driving range. Patrick, please tell us more.
Okay, thank you. The applications within the Top Canton are for the final plan development district, the site plan, and the preliminary condominium. And previously, this has been before the Planning Commission a few different times. First for the conditional rezoning and the preliminary PDD. And then most recent at the September 9th, 2024 meeting, we reviewed the final PDD, site plan, and preliminary condominium. And at that meeting, the application was postponed pending receipt of the following items. First, revised plans that address the conditions of preliminary PDD approval and the township staff comments. Also, a revised PDD agreement, master deed and bylaws. And finally, probably most importantly, was updated traffic information pursuant to the traffic information study. There were a number of comments from staff and the Planning Commission at that time about some of the findings and conclusions in the traffic study. Since September 9th, we've had several conversations with the applicants about that information. We've also had discussions with MDOT and Wayne County and the applicant's traffic engineer just to make sure that we were all on the same page. And in terms of some of the scope and remedies in the traffic study, how they would be addressed by the applicant and in the future, if necessary, by public road agencies. So we'll get into those comments in a moment. Looking at the location of the site, just to give a little bit of a background. The proposal is for 2 fast food restaurants and an indoor-outdoor golf driving range on the north side of Ford Road, just east of I-275 and just south of Warren Road. On the site plan sheet itself, which I'll bring up in a moment, the fast food restaurants will be concentrated on the south side of the site along Ford Road. And there's a large wooded wetland area just northwest of where the fast food restaurants are proposed. Much of that will be preserved with the exception of some stormwater ponds and a private road that would be proposed to go through there. And then near the central to north part of the site is where the proposed golf driving range will go. At the September meeting, we also discussed some phasing of the development. At the final PDD stage, the applicant is proposing to construct the project in 2 phases. The first phase would be the fast food restaurants along Ford Road and some of the traffic improvements. In the second phase would be the development of the golf driving range on the north side of the site, as well as the emergency access drive from Warren Road and a sign along 275 that would be an on-premises commercial sign. Next, going to the plans themselves. There we are. So on this black and white on the screen, maybe a little difficult to read, but this plan illustrates the proposed development with the fast food restaurants on the south side, the private road that goes northbound, and then the golf driving range and the associated parking lot near the north end. There are several elements to our staff review letter. It's a 17-page letter, and I won't go through everything because a lot of it is just either repeating or updating information that was in our September letter. So a lot of the site plan related items like landscaping, access management, dumpster enclosures, architectures, a lot of those discussions we've already had, and I'll be happy to go back to them. I just don't want to repeat them with a lot of items on the agenda and a lot to talk about this particular case. What I do want to focus on, though, is the updates to the traffic. At the September meeting, we talked about the traffic study and many of the items that were in that traffic report that we still had questions about. And specifically, they were impacts to the levels of service at the intersections of Warren and Haggerty, at Ford and Lots, and at the site driveway. At the site driveway itself, the applicants are proposing a fully actuated traffic signal that will remedy the issues that come up there. And so our primary focus was on the intersections of Warren and Haggerty and Ford and Lots. And one of the items that we talked about with the applicant and their traffic engineer was to update the traffic study to discuss specifically what types of signal optimizations would be taking place that were previously noted in the traffic study. And what's actually proposed in the traffic study are the signal timing splits and adjusting the signal timing and not necessarily the optimization. The more that I've learned about some of the differences in the terminology is that if there's optimization, it's more for a corridor and it's for more than one signal and it's a much larger regional project. In this case, what we've been talking about is really the signal timing. And so we've talked to the applicant's traffic engineer and the road agencies about that. At the Warren Road and Haggerty Road intersection, the proposal in the traffic study is to adjust the signal timing splits during the AM peak hour and to adjust the timing signal length in the PM hour with the timing plan allowing for a longer cycle that will add 10 seconds to the existing 80-second cycle that goes eastbound and westbound during the PM peak hour. So the traffic study concludes that with those adjustments at Warren and Haggerty regarding the signal timing, that intersection will operate at a level of service D or better, which is considered to be acceptable levels of service. For the intersection of Ford Road and Lots Road, the traffic study recommends installing a southbound right turn overlap signal. And I'll put up on the screen exactly what that means. And this is from the traffic study itself. I'll zoom out here. So if we're looking southbound on Lots Road and looking towards Ford Road, and I'll bring up a Google Street View just to illustrate that. So if we're going on southbound Lots and this is the intersection of Ford Road, if we look up at the traffic signals, the two on the right side, those are solid signals to go straight or right. And then to the left, there's a left arrow. And what we want to focus on here is this signal on the right side that controls both the through lane and the right turn lane. And what's proposed at that signal is on that right signal to add in the right arrows for yellow and green. And that would allow more traffic to move in that southbound right turn lane. So in the traffic study, that's suggested as one of the improvements to help that intersection. Also, the traffic study recommends adjusting the signal timing during all the peak periods, which includes overall generally, and the traffic study has detailed times, but in general, what it means is less green time for eastbound and westbound traffic on Ford and more green time for the northbound and southbound Lots Road. And based on the analysis in the traffic study, with those signal timing adjustments, it indicates that the intersection of Ford and Lots would operate at level of service D or better. And then finally, at the intersection of the Ford Road and Site Drive, the traffic study recommends constructing a right turn deceleration lane on Ford Road at the Site Drive, which the applicant is proposing, and also installing a fully actuated traffic signal with permissive protective eastbound left turn phasing and overlap phasing for the southbound right turn movement, which is also proposed to be installed by the applicant. The last thing that I'll say about the traffic impact study improvements are that the signal improvements that are proposed in the traffic study for both Ford and Lots Road and for the Site Drive, those are improvements that the applicant is proposing to do and install, and the applicant is working with MDOT through that permitting process. When it comes to adjusting the signal timing, when we discuss this with MDOT and Wayne County, the traffic impact study in that sense is a little bit more theoretical in terms of projections. To actually get the road agencies to go ahead with adjusting signal timings, they would have to visit the site, they would have to observe the actual traffic of what's happening, and then based on that, they could do their signal timing adjustments. So even though the signal timing adjustments in the traffic study indicate that those intersections will operate at an acceptable level of service, ultimately it's up to the road agencies once the traffic is happening and the developments are up and running and what's actually happening on the ground, because it could be different than what's in the traffic study. We won't really know for sure, but it was good to have those discussions with the public road agencies to know what the process is and some of the things that they look at before they go out and retime a signal. So retiming a signal with a public road agency is possible, but it's something that they have to come in afterward and analyze and then adjust accordingly. So we may see some signal timings. We may see them that end up different than what's in the traffic study. So that's something that we really can't commit to at this point in terms of the exact changes to the signal timings, but we can have those discussions about what the applicant's proposing to do in terms of going through the permit process of installing the traffic signals themselves. And then with the other things that were in our review letter from September 9th that we wanted to see updates on, we've gotten updates on all those other items that we've mentioned. Most of them are pretty minor in comparison. Some of them are more detailed in terms of the master deed and bylaws. The master deed and bylaws we have several comments on, and we're not yet at the point of final condominium review. Once we get to that point, that part will be fairly straightforward, where the final condominium review will just be creating the lots officially and establishing the final lot lines in unit, and also establishing the final master deed and bylaws. So that comes a little bit later, but it'll be a much easier process than the preliminary will. So our recommendation with the proposed documents and the new information that we've received is that if the Planning Commission is satisfied with the plans, the PD agreement, the master deed, the bylaws, and all the supplemental documents, including the traffic study, we would recommend approval of the final PDD application, the site plan application, and the preliminary condominium application, subject to 4 conditions. First, that the tree and woodland site assessment be updated based on relocating the golf facility and removal of the hotel, including updated calculations on removed landmark trees. Second, revising the PDD agreement to address items noted by staff, including signage conditions, Warren Road sidewalk terms, loading space provisions for the Chick-fil-A and Portillo sites. Third, this says arriving, but it's revising the dumpster enclosure plans for Portillo's and the multi-tenant commercial building to comply with section 2.14 of the zoning ordinance. And fourth, deferring final action on the master deed and bylaws to final site condominium review, including addressing staff's comments. On the proposed conditions for the first one, it's just updating the information. For the second one, we've previously discussed including a sidewalk along Warren Road, the frontage of the site, and I'll zoom in on that on the proposed plan. And as part of the application, the plans do note that along the frontage of Warren Road, that the applicant will install the sidewalk. Alternatively, the applicant would be willing to discuss with Canton a mutually agreeable arrangement where there could be a payment in lieu of sidewalk construction. And the reason being is that to the west is the I-275 trail. And also on the Warren Road Bridge, there's a sidewalk termination. So in the future, there could be a larger project where we may want to connect to the Warren Road Bridge sidewalk and or the I-275 trail. And if that's the case, with the topography that's along Warren Road, between Warren Road and the north part of the site, it would be a much larger project than just installing a sidewalk. So there's some things there that we're looking at with our engineering division and internally about what a potential project could look like. So the applicant has stated that they'll install the sidewalk if it's part of the process, but they're also willing to do a payment in lieu of sidewalk if we have a much larger project that there would be a contribution to that would still result in the sidewalk as well as any other sidewalk connections to I-275 or the bridge. But the outcome there is still undetermined in terms of how feasible that is. So the applicant has offered that as an alternative. And then finally, the third proposed condition is relatively minor with the dumpster enclosure plans. It's just putting information on the plans that comply with the ordinance. So with that, our recommendation is that if the plans are acceptable, we have a recommendation for approval, and we've included a resolution in the packet. We also have a model motion for postponing action if there's any additional information that the Planning Commission wants to see before it takes action on these applications. So that concludes our staff report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Would you like to add anything to that?
Much as I love to talk, I'll follow your lead.
Okay.
Steve Robinson.
Thank you, Steve. All right, very good. All right, I misspoke earlier that there is not a public hearing for this. So if anybody does want to say anything about this project, I think we should offer a moment or two for that, if anyone's willing to open the public hearing. All right. Support. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Lee and support by Commissioner Eggenberger to open a public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Does anyone in the audience want to say anything about this development? All right. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Lee and support again by Commissioner Eggenberger to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, I think I'd really like to hear what Commissioner Cruz has to say first, so
Wow.
I'm gonna go to you. No pressure. I mean, he is our traffic engineer, so.
So it sounded like Wayne County will not adjust the signal timing until everything's functioning, is that right? Not functioning,
Not
you're
functioning.
right.
Yeah, well, based on our discussions, the traffic study is helpful in terms of looking at the traffic that it measures on the day that it's done, and then modeling development and projecting future growth. There's always a percentage that's put in there. So the traffic impact study is a projection. It includes a lot of solid data, but there are factors in that projection that could end up underestimating or overestimating the level of traffic that is seen at the time that the development is up and running. So for a road agency to go out and adjust the signal timing, and this is Wayne County or MDOT, they would have to look at the current conditions and the current levels of service, and then determine based on that information whether to make adjustments to the signal timing. So with a development, once it's built, that's the time that they would actually look at it to see what's the impact on the development and how much to adjust the signal timing one way or the other.
So, I got two concerns about that. You're gonna leave it, they're gonna leave it as is, open up these stores, wait for, it's gonna be more traffic, there's no doubt, right? So they're going to let it go and then figure it out as the traffic increases? That's their strategy?
Well, I can't give a definitive answer on that in terms of whether they would be looking at adjusting the signal timing any earlier, because one of the things that the traffic study does indicate is that even after the development is in, once the signals are installed and the signal timing is adjusted, in many cases, the level of service actually gets better. In other words, better
It's not
than
gonna
it
get
is
better
today.
here, I guarantee it. There's no way it'll get better with Chick-fil-A and Portillo's. It's impossible. So, one quick question that I want to get out of the way. The proposed hardscape improvements like the decel lane, you've agreed to construct those per the traffic impact study, correct? Okay, so that's at least one piece of the puzzle. But the concern is, it's gonna have to go bad for them to look at it. So I guess, I mean, someone has to follow up with the county and MDOT that it's gonna be bad in this area. Someone's gotta implement this and somebody's gotta follow up. That's my concern. I get that the actual traffic may not be exactly like the study, but my concern is I don't want a problem to persist without
Right,
anyone
no,
taking action.
In other words, you're asking, what's the enforcement mechanism here?
Yeah, what is the enforcement mechanism? Who's responsible and who's gonna monitor it? I think those procedures have to be in place and it can't be ignored, in other words.
Can there be some sort of, and I know the story, it's Wayne County, there's only certain things we can do, but is there some way we can get out of Wayne County that they will look at this within a certain period of time, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, whatever, to evaluate what changes need to be made in terms of signal timing and all that sort of thing? Well, to Commissioner Cruz's point, we don't want to see this thing drag out and persist and just become a bigger headache.
Well, we can definitely reach out to both Wayne County and MDOT, and when we talk, we had a meeting with those road agencies just to talk about really for us to just get more information about the process of getting the signal timing updated, and it was a productive conversation where we didn't hear no or anything like that or any impediments. It was more a matter of they didn't want to necessarily deal with the theoretical. They wanted to deal more with the practical of what was actually happening. So they wanted to have something that they could observe. Now, after that meeting is when we had received the updated traffic study that showed impacts of levels of service and how the signal timing specifically can impact those intersections. So that's information that is in the traffic study that is in the summary portion at the beginning. But I don't know if the road agencies have necessarily looked at that. But what we can do is we can send this traffic study to the road agencies just to let them know, even without the development and the current levels of service and the issues that we're having there, the traffic study does indicate that changing some of the signal timings can alleviate current conditions. That's just without this development. So we're happy to talk to the road agencies, let them know of, make them aware of what's been measured at these intersections and some of the potential remedies, both with or without the development. I think that can be helpful and something for them to look at. And we can get more information about what that process is. So what we've kind of come to here is the difference between things that are within the developer's control in terms of the signals and the right turn decel lane and the permitting process, and then those things that are outside of the developer's control, like the signal timing process. And in that case, we're willing to help work with the road agencies to see how we can facilitate that and if there's anything we can do to move that along. If it's possible to do something before the development to improve traffic flow, we're happy to see what we're able to do.
This, with all due respect, Patrick, this is exactly what we've been talking about, though, for the last 6 months to a year, though. We're being asked to make a decision on something where we have incomplete information, and it's maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. I mean, I have no issue with the developer. I mean, I think the developer's done everything they can do to try and make this work. And you're right. The things that we're questioning are things that are largely out of their control. But clearly in our zoning ordinance and the state law that says of the things that we have to look at when we're making a decision about a special land use or a PDD or a zoning ordinance amendment or whatever the case may be, is that we got to look at health and safety and impacts on infrastructure and all of that. How can we make an educated decision when the county says, well, we'll look at it after it's done and see if it truly is a problem? Well, I mean, I guess my question is then, maybe this is somewhat unrelated, is this how all the jurisdictions in Metro Detroit handle this? And when I'm saying other jurisdictions, I'm talking like Oakland County, Washtenaw County, Macomb County. Because this just isn't right. And I'll be quite honest with Mr. Robinson. I want this development here. But the way that this process has gone for reviewing these traffic concerns is quite honestly is a joke.
Well, I don't know how other road agencies do it, like in Washtenaw or Oakland or Macomb. And when we had a discussion about it, we didn't really have a written policy or anything that we're able to put down in writing. It was more of they can go out, they can look at the traffic, they can look at conditions, and then determine if they do signal timing adjustments. But we talk about it in the context of the development. So in the context of the development, not just this development, but any development, they would want to see what the actual impact is before they adjust signal timing. And that could be any road agency if they want to see what the actual impact is so that they know exactly what to do with signal timing. So in terms of any kind of affirmative answer, I wasn't really expecting anything. I just wanted to know that there was a process that they could go through with road agencies to try to affect that.
You know what happens here, Patrick? It's going to go bad, and the people that are going to get the heat from it are this commission, you folks on staff, and the administration. Not Wayne County, not the state. And that's what's going to happen. And the word will be that we made an ill-informed decision on something as significant as this. And what the heck is the purpose of a traffic study if we're not going to
Ask
use
that.
it?
Why do we even require a traffic study then?
Well, I think with, when we get the traffic study, we know the current levels of service. We know what the projected levels of service. And then the things that are within the applicant's control, getting the right turn deceleration lane, getting the signal at the site drive, getting the right turn signal on southbound Lots Road. Those are all really good hardscaping improvements and actual improvements that are going to help with the level of service, not just for this development, but the current levels. Really what we're looking at in terms of with the road agencies is adjusting the signal timing, and that's something that I think is a little bit more scientific based on conditions that are actually happening. So, I'll give deference to the road agencies in terms of, them wanting to see what's actually out there to determine when they change the signals, because I'm sure they have the same discussions internally when they make a change to signals, and they might improve traffic in one area, but it's a little longer in others. So, they might get some scrutiny in terms of what they do, their impacts on signal timing as well. So I know they have a process of doing it. It's just nothing I can provide many details on because I really don't know. So I guess to answer the question with the traffic study, I think there's a lot of good that it did in terms of showing on the plan the improvements that the developer is willing to make, and actual improvements of things that they're going to put in there that we'll see on day one when the development's up and running. It's just the signal timing is more of an unknown at this point.
Commissioner Janowski, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, so before we go to the second part, I'd like to start with the route. So if the engineers spent a lot of time with this, I'd like to hear the summary, because you have a better understanding of what actually the calculations and the data, and then how this is working, and then we can tie in, how confident you are with the results of the study. I don't know what kind of pool of data you have or what numbers you were using, so is that acceptable?
To hear from the engineer?
Yeah, hear the engineer, the study, a summary about what, what's the existing condition. They spent a lot of time with it. I haven't spent a lot of time. What's the existing condition, and what conditions or what favorability we will have from implementing this, the lights, and
Okay.
at a high level summary, but.
Are you the engineer? Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay. You want to pretend you're the engineer? Answer some question.
Come up.
Yeah, please come to the mic. Yeah. Yeah. Thank
No,
you.
go ahead, because I'm not sure exactly what the question is.
Sorry. So I think it might be helpful to kind of
I'm sorry, could you state your name? and
Yeah,
address
Ryan
for the-
Schultz,
Okay, and address, please, for the record?
Broder Saxey Real Estate, and my address is 639 Birch Tree Court, Rochester Hills, Michigan.
Thank you.
I am not the engineer.
Okay, got it.
So it's helpful to understand the traffic impact analysis and what it does. Fundamentally, and I'm probably talking to a traffic engineer, so he's going to chuckle at some of these statements, but what it does is it takes the existing conditions, it layers on top of those existing conditions our unique daily trips and how we're going to impact the area as a whole. So it's a theoretical model on how we're going to make the conditions worse, right? We're bringing in additional traffic, we're going to make the situation worse. Then comes the fundamental improvements, which are things that are within our control. That would be physical improvements, right turn lane, traffic signals. And it also gives recommendation on timing suggestions. Those timing suggestions have to be approved by Lansing, and then it's fundamentally the road agency's responsibility to put those into play. So we're really removed. We can't go in and tinker with anything, make adjustments. So I'm not saying that the process is correct, because I understand the situation. I live in a community that struggles dramatically with traffic conditions. We have agreed to everything that we can agree to within this report, and we are going to do those measures. The things that are out of our control are simply the signal timing. But I do want to make one additional point, that those signal timings get layered on our project, additional projects, the Boulevard project. All these things cumulatively come together, and those road agencies take all of that data, and then they make adjustments. They do not do this on a project-by-project basis. So it's just, and I'm echoing a lot of the things that we talked about in the conversation with Patrick, but I think it's helpful to have you in the loop on the conversations that were had. If we could get in there and meddle with the timing to make it better, we would, but we legally can't do that. We can do everything that's in our power, which are the improvements that we're proposing, and then it's really up to those road agencies to do their job. You can be a squeaky wheel. We can't really be a squeaky wheel. But certainly the community can be the squeaky wheel in Wayne.'s ear, in Wayne and MDOT's ear, saying, these things were sent to you, this is the existing conditions we see, this is how it's gotten worse or better. We'd like to see these global changes made. Please continue to investigate that. And ultimately, we want that for our tenants as well, because
Yeah.
they're gonna be on the receiving end of these traffic conditions.
And complaints.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
no, we
I don't know that I
understand.
necessarily summarized, but I kind of just, that's a global.
I wanted the engineer's data.
Yeah,
So he
yeah,
understood
I
the
know.
play and how it relates to the other
Yeah,
congruent full whole system, so.
All the data's been submitted. It's been submitted a couple times. The other thing I think that Ryan said, I just want to reinforce, is that our traffic study is based on an assumption. It's assuming that, you know, that out of the 10 people that drove by between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 of them pulled into the development, 7 of them kept on going. Nobody knows how many people are going to pull in. It's also, our traffic study is layered on top of the fact that everything west of 275 is being remodeled into a boulevard. So we had to take all of their traffic studies, and we're modeling our traffic study, modeled a situation that doesn't even occur yet. Because we had to model, if you remember going back, we had to remodel our site based on what the MDOT was projecting was gonna happen west of 275. So I'm assuming with all these big projects going on, like Brian stated, they're gonna wait to see how this thing actually matures, you know, before they start doing signal timing. I mean, they just don't change signal timing on every time someone does a project.
And we're not asking for that.
No, I'm just telling you, that's just the way the process is.
Just one last point, speaking to that, you're right. It affects your development as well. So I suggest that Canton Township and the developer jointly pressure the local road agencies to monitor this right before it opens, right when it opens. The good thing is, it looks like Portillo's and Chick-fil-A is phase 1, right? And then the Gulf is phase 2. So it gives time to phase in traffic. And, you know, my concern, and I think our concern is, someone better do something about it, and somebody's got to put pressure on those agencies to do something right away. So I think those are the efforts that we're looking for.
I'm sorry, what is your timing as far as like, okay, so phase 1 is the restaurants, and then Topgolf. And I'm just trying to put it together in my mind what the timing of that is as compared to what we keep being told is the timing for the Boulevard project. I'm just trying
which
to see.
keeps moving into the
Yeah,
future.
I mean, I'm just trying to see how they all kind of
We're
fit
looking at
together.
phase 1 this summer.
Okay.
As far as the Topgolf, we're not sure yet. We're still dealing with
So it won't be like 6 months after. Yeah. And you're saying this summer, meaning start construction, end construction, and open, which,
Yeah, we would like to deliver the pads. Our job is
Okay.
to build
Okay.
to do put the light in, put all the roads in, put the parking lots in and everything.
so you're doing all the infrastructure and they can start construction in the summer, so they'll probably be opening
One open
the end of the year
fall,
or
winter, yeah.
early winter.
So
Okay, or
Topgolf,
midwinter.
assuming you get all the approvals you need, probably 2 years into the future then?
At least a year, okay. Well, that is helpful.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to ask
Not so
Doug.
much for us, but I'm glad.
Exactly, yeah. It's helpful for
holding
us,
costs.
that traffic issue, because
Baby
we
steps on
do,
the traffic issues, certainly.
yeah.
I have one other, just a point that, I've driven the site. You got to go through if you're in Canton. There's like a entry to the freeway right there. I think it's almost like, is it 10 feet, maybe 20 feet? But wherever your entrance to your site is, I'm looking at the drawing that you got here, and it looks like it's very close. Is this even being, yeah. There's an entry to the freeway right there. Where's the entry to the site?
Patrick just had his mouse on it.
That right
Yeah.
there, okay.
So,
That's your entry.
Yep.
And there's an entry to the freeway right
And they're
there.
going to put a decel lane in front of the tile shop.
Okay. Now, are you able to, I'm not an engineer, I'm like you. I'm not an engineer, I'm just looking at it.
Just play
If
one.
you're getting
it
into a
how they
decel lane and you are gonna get out of the decel lane, how do you get out of that site and get onto the freeway or avoid the freeway? And maybe this isn't a question that I have for you, but I'm just looking at it and it looks a little weird that you got a freeway right there, an entryway, I'm saying.
That isn't a signalized
Understand?
intersection. So the movements would stop westbound traffic, and exiting the site would not have any westbound traffic coming into that intersection. So the movements there would be right out or a left and then to head back east. So the traffic would be stopped in that instance. You could make a right while it's a right on red, right?
Right.
In theory, if there was no traffic
Traffic,
coming.
right.
So the signalized entrance will stop that and allow traffic to exit our site.
Okay. Okay.
Did I
Not an
I hope
engineer,
I
I'm just
explained that
saying.
clearly.
It looked a little weird to me.
It looks like you would come out and you would be in the far right lane, and then that far right lane, I mean, assuming you make your turn the correct way, that far right lane then splits, and part of it becomes the on-ramp, and part of it
the freeway.
becomes a
That
through,
ASOL lane, when you make the right turn out,
sorry?
ASOL lane that you can see right there, that
Oh, that,
the
yeah,
taper.
highlighting is detached from the entrance ramp.
right,
They're not connected, so you wouldn't make a right out directly into the ramp.
right. No, I'm saying it would
That was
split.
why, we were very careful, and we had to work with MDOT on the siting of this location.
Okay.
Yeah,
where the-
so I
where
don't
the
think
drive
there's
is.
a concern there.
That prevents you essentially from getting trapped, which I think is the concern.
Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. Okay.
Can
Can
I?
I-
Is it just a free-for-all? What are we doing?
No, I was going to continue
Okay.
with Alan, see if he had anything else, or Gordy, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I understand that. I'm more concerned with the backup and the impact overall, as everyone's been speaking of, so.
Okay. And Doug, did you have any concerns, thoughts? I
Do I have
mean,
any concerns?
no, you don't,
I'm
I'm
done, I'm
sure.
done, I'm done as far as,
Stated your
yeah,
piece.
yeah.
Okay, then I'd like to come to Commissioner
Oh,
Eggenberger.
okay,
Nancy,
well,
please.
very good. So my concerns, beyond just the traffic on Ford Road, is that it feels like once you get in, there's some issues. And the trouble is if there's issues once you get in, that's gonna back up more, right? Because there's gonna be too much cars and you can't pull in. So Patrick, the one I'm on, I guess I found one on, also, I think the very first one you showed me, or not me, but put up here, it says there's four.
It's just you,
Yeah,
Nancy.
me personally, and I appreciate that. You said there was gonna be 4 lanes to go in. On 69, I can kind of see it looks like 4 lanes. But my question is, okay, I've pulled in and I've decided that I want to go to
Pillows.
Portillo's. I'm gonna make a left turn lane, I'm gonna make a left turn over 2 other lanes of traffic. And my assumption is those 2 lanes could be pretty full of people leaving. So do we have anything that tries to make that a little bit easier turn?
Time was based on MDOT's directive, where we moved those driveways for Portillo's to avoid that conflict. So we're comfortable with the civil engineers, the traffic engineers and MDOT, that we moved that driveway to correct the exact situation you're.
Can you repeat that into the mic? Because it won't be picked up on the
I will say
recording.
it because I
Okay,
know where
thank
he's
you.
getting at. So the 2 lanes that are exiting the site, original concept, a single lane. MDOT guidance, give us 2 lanes to allow the appropriate stacking and push the exit drive of Portillo's to the back of the site. So the maneuver that you are proposing to make becomes more achievable.
That's the exit. How do I get into?
Go in that
What
same
it does is it allows double the amount of cars
Yeah,
to
but
fit
she's
in
a-
that stack.
Yeah, you enter Portillo's from the back of the site.
right through to that, right there,
Not right there.
right there.
Yes, right there.
Okay,
Where
well, you
his-
just had to cross over those 2 lanes to get in.
Correct.
But there should be enough room for all the stacking, given
Yeah.
that they split
If you didn't
one
have that,
lane into
the
2.
length of the cars, because they'd be doubled, they'd be all the way back further in the site. So they took care of that problem within the site.
Because there's 2 lanes now.
Right, so you can fit double the people.
Well, how many cars can you fit in those double lanes?
18 times, divide by 18, whatever the distance is.
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, that's probably at least a 20-car stack per lane, so 40 cars could queue.
Okay, yeah, that does.
I'm making an educated guess by looking at the stacking lane of Portillo, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Okay, and then the 2 entrances on the other side, is one a lane for, this is coming in off of Ford Road. So go back down to it, the entrance up, this one's okay. So is one gonna be from the left turn from the light? And the other gonna be the right turn lane? Enter off of Ford Road? Any of these that show the entrance should.
Yeah.
I'm looking that way, waiting for
It's only
Patrick to
one
land
lane,
on
but I
a,
thought
land
it
on a
was gonna be
site.
4 lanes.
it's 2 lanes in.
Two lanes in, 2 lanes out.
Right, so the 2 lanes in is one of the lanes, the left turn from Ford Road, and the
Correct.
other lane, the right turn.
If
Yeah, so
you
it'd be a-
turn correctly.
A left turn in off of eastbound Ford Road at the signalized light.
Right.
You would make that move. Or if you were coming westbound on Ford Road, you would take the decel lane and turn into the property. 2 internal lanes coming in.
And yet,
then maybe-
technically, from the left turn lane from Ford Road, you should be in the left lane, and from the right turn lane, you should be in the
Which-
right lane.
which most people
But
don't
most
do.
people don't understand that.
Well, and if you want to get into First Restaurant, you're going to have to pop into the left.
Exactly. Then you signal and you move over. Just saying.
How smooth is this?
Depends if
Okay.
you want a hot dog or a chicken sandwich, so.
Right,
yes.
so
Right.
decide what you want. Okay, so then when you go in, can you show me then kind of the top of it if we decide, no, we want chicken? Then we're gonna go, keep going, and then we pop up behind it, is that right?
Yeah, there is an option. The 2 drives are interconnected here in the south. So if for some reason someone wanted to go to Portillo's and they couldn't use this driveway, they could still go all the way up to Chick-fil-A, enter through the parking entrance, and then use the cross connection between the 2 restaurants. So people will be able to go back and forth between the 2 restaurants through this cross connection drive without having to get back on the main drive.
Maybe another chicken.
Yeah, actually, I was a little afraid of that, because that's where somebody coming out of the drive-through.
Can't go through the drive-through. You'd have to loop back around. Come in through here.
But just recircle the site if you wanted to get into the drive-through queue, which,
But if you cross right over there, you're getting into the traffic that's exiting from the drive-through, right?
Yeah, so there would be a no turn sign. If someone was going from Chick-fil-A to Portillo's, they would just go through the parking lot and then queue up in their drive-through on the north side. And enter that, same as if it was any other type of fast food restaurants.
That's why that curb island is, you could queue there. Patrick, I don't know how many cars that queues, but it's
33 point.
It's Chick-fil-A, they're aware of the situation they cause, and their double drive-through queues an extraordinarily large amount of cars.
You can picture that movement, trying to do that U-turn. People are coming in.
Yeah,
It's not ideal there.
yeah, I think that's the rare instance where you made a mistake and you went, I think most people are gonna,
Hot dog and a chicken sandwich, though.
unless you're that guy, yes.
Come on,
You
right?
got kids.
Come on, double drive.
I got them,
Those
I
sort of
get it.
areas make me nervous, though. I think there's a lot of somebody coming out of just getting their food, they're half eating, they're trying to figure out where they're going, and somebody cuts in front of them. I'm saying, it's what happens, and so this could be I hope there'll be some signs, Patrick, that yield sign, just, anything that tells
It-
somebody, hey,
It is substantially signed. I think the thing
Signage
that's
is on
important, I think, is
69.
really, is the cross-connectivity, while it may perceive itself as an issue, I think when we start walling off these sites, then you're pushing everyone back onto the
It's a
main
good thing,
secondary,
for
and that's,
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
You gotta connect
There's a
them.
stop
You gotta
sign there and a
connect
stop sign.
and we've done plenty of work in other communities that don't necessarily feel the same, and it's,
You
Well, we-
need them
we try to
connected,
encourage
yeah.
that
I've been there
In the
before.
community with everything,
I don't mind.
Going back out on the road.
rather than going back on the road.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the other thing I was noticing This is we're talking about the grandchildren that he decides. So I don't know which one this
Wait.
is on.
I did not understand that.
Oh, well.
Don't go there.
You got it, you got it.
Well,
You understand.
wait,
Make
but-
it an emergency.
Oh,
Make it
got-
an emergency.
You gotta get out.
You gotta get out.
the grandkids are misbehaving.
There's some vomit,
Got
who
it.
knows?
Okay.
So-
Vomit.
So you go up and you're trying to get into the Chick-fil-A, and then you guys had this little curlicue that seems to be a lot shorter than it used to be, because the phase one, I felt like was pulled back. And I don't know what we need to look at to see that.
Yeah.
There it is.
The cul-de-sac?
Yes.
Or curlicue, you know, there's lots of names for these, Patrick.
Trying to figure that out. What the hell's a curlicue?
Very scientific.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like this was a longer path before.
It was in the previous plan when this road continued through. They could stack all the way up to the former site of the hotel. When it was put into two separate phases, in phase one, they terminate it just south of the wetland area and deferring building the drive farther north and into the wetland area until the Top Golf project comes in. So what they ended up with was to put in the cul-de-sac, and so that if for some reason this drive was backed up, the cul-de-sac could be used to circle people through. And then if it started to back up out of the cul-de-sac going eastward, they could probably use internal Chick-fil-A site to circle more traffic in there. So it would give a little bit more of an outlet for operations without impacting Portillo's and ultimately Ford Road.
Yeah, because I feel like I remember when you were showing it to us originally, I got the impression you felt like you needed that extra.
Saturday, and then they went back.
From the very, very beginning, we've designed this with, super stacks on both projects, like 70 some odd cars in both stacks. We also designed this so that there's really no potential for the restaurants to back up to Ford Road. That's why we put everything back to the entrance. So, you'd have to stack back forever, to try to get, so that we really took a lot of lessons learned on other projects where, not only were the queues shorter, or once you got to the queue, there's not a lot of room between the back of the queue and the main road. And so sometimes you see those drive-throughs back up. That's why this was designed the way it was, with two heavy drive-through users.
March, and they did one in July.
There's a lot of factors of safety in here to make sure there's room for everybody. I don't know what the township ordinance for stack is, but I think Chick-fil-A is 76 cars.
Which would you do during the winter?
One thing I do want to make a point,
52.
which is always, I think we try to drive this home at many planning commissions. If there's 70 cars in the stack, the restaurant is functioning poorly. They're not doing their job. Their objective is to run cars through as fast as they can. So trust me, internally, they'll recognize, if we have stacking issues, we're not functioning well, and things need to be
Lose some
improved.
money.
I think we also started this project earlier on in Chick-fil-A's rollout into Michigan, where they were having significant issues on some of their sites. And so this was designed, we're 2 years into this already, so this was designed before, as Haggerty opened up. They've had significant penetration. They're not seeing those drive-through backups at like day one, like they did when they opened Novi. It was just a complete nightmare. So, they've operationally really changed. The penetration is much better, so you don't have people driving 20 miles to get to a Chick-fil-A. You can drive 3 miles to get to Chick-fil-A now. So it's settled down for them, for everybody. But we did design this with those worst cases from the past. We've been involved with some of those, so we wanted to make sure that didn't happen again.
And I have been I have my thing off the whole time, sorry. Clarence had another question that he and I had been kind of discussing.
Should I move on? ma'am?
Please do, yeah.
Okay.
But make sure your mic's on.
Yeah, I got it. It's on. Well, a couple of things I picked up on, and I'm looking at this more and more. More you play with it, more questions you got. I noticed that there's far fewer parking spaces at Chick-fil-A than it is at Portillo's. I'm asking this as a function. Is it, because I would get out of the car and go in. You get what I'm saying? If the line's that long, I just go in the restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm looking at it, and I think it's like, I saw it early, I can't find it, like 40-some parking spaces. And in Portillo's, it's like 90, I think. Am I right? Close?
Operationally, two restaurants that have different focuses,
Okay.
just on the
That's it?
on the way that they account for portions of their business. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be more people that come into Portillo's. They know that operationally, those are the parking spaces that they feel that
Got it.
they need.
Okay.
Chick-fil-A there's some instances where Chick-fil-A's are going to no seating restaurants. It's just drive-through.
I guess my question was, I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
I'm starting.
Is Chick-fil-A a sit-down restaurant at this location?
They both are at
They
this
both
location.
are?
Yes.
Okay. So that gives me an option.
Different dining room sizes, right?
Okay. And the other thing was the emergency vehicle that has to come in and get someone who's sick in your 52-car stacked lot. How do they get in there, and how do they get the car out? That was my first question when I looked at this and kind of studied. I said, how do you get out of this thing? I'm trapped.
So if somebody has a medical emergency when they're in
Yes.
the drive-through lane?
Get rid of don't use my grandkids anymore. But just say it's a medical emergency.
Yeah.
That's how I'm thinking, you know.
No, I completely understand. So there is post-ordering. Assuming many of you have been to a Chick-fil-A. I'm making that assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. In a mall.
Okay,
No
well, that's
parking.
not going to apply. When you order, the two lines coalesce into one. And then functionally, you have prior to that, in your scenario, theoretically, you would be trapped.
Okay.
That's not what the drawings show.
They coalesce. Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm on page 464 where you had the arrows before, and it shows, I mean, that you've drawn cars stacked in both lanes.
Double Q and
Yeah, all the way to the end of the drive-through.
Yeah, and occasionally, if they're really busy, and just operationally, I've seen this before. If they're really busy, they'll keep both lanes open, and they'll have staff out there with iPads, and they'll actually carry the food to the outer lane. If they're not as busy, sometimes they'll put cones in so that they do narrow down into one lane and funnel people to the drive-through.
So if you're really busy, there's really no way to get somebody out of the line.
Trained on there, if, you know, more often than, you know, a mechanical problem or a car breaks down in the drive-through, they're trained to
Right,
try to
that's
get,
what I mean.
you know, to clear out one half of the stack, to get somebody in there, you know, to tow the car out. And a medical emergency, I'm assuming, would be very different if they're gonna get to wherever that car is as soon as they can, and it's more about the person in the car than getting the car out of the way. But they are trained on, you know, if somebody breaks down, there's two lanes, you know, let's get everybody around the car that's broken down, et cetera.
Just one more follow-up. Is it because of the wetlands that you don't go beyond where your boundary is right now? Is that what you're trying to conserve? Because it's all about money, I know that.
curlicue?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, if you had another outside lane that had no traffic, it allowed emergency vehicles, it allowed someone to get out of even the internal lane, if they could get someone to let them in and get out of there. Is that the reason, or is it just, that's the way you design it? I just want an honest opinion, that's all.
here's the honest. The wetlands drives almost every
Got
decision
it.
on this entire site.
Okay, all right.
But also, they don't put a third lane in. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never seen them put a third lane in.
That would be a
Now,
lot of
whenever,
expense.
when we do a single lane, like a lot of restaurants are single drive-through lanes, most municipalities will ask us to put a second lane in for the reasons you described. I don't think we've ever seen a community that asks us to put a third lane in. So that would be unusual request. In this particular case, it would be in the wetlands, and we'd have a fill issue,
You got a problem with it?
impact issue with the wetlands.
Yeah, okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Watkins.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. We've heard a lot, right? Not only in this particular session, but others. And I'll make a couple quick comments and then I'll close it out. I saw that you took about half the size of the seating area in Portillo's. It went from about 4,500 to about 2,500 square feet. I know the standard size is about 7,500 in their Michigan stores. So give me a quick rundown on why that much out of Portillo's, what was the change in the idea, and then I'll finish out. So please.
That's a Portillo's corporate changing of their base plan. They're doing it across the country. They're not building the other model anymore. This is their updated prototype.
Yeah, it was interesting to me. The Livonia location it's about 7,500 square feet, but nevertheless, listen, doing development is already hard enough. I mean, whether it's Richard Broder and Todd Saxey or Bedrock or Bill's development, right? It's hard. And it's tough to go and do a traffic study and then come back and we tell you, go back and do it again with MDOT with something that's not there. I get it. But I think that there's an expectation of this level of scrutiny, right? Because once the development's up, it's gone, you guys moved on to the next thing, we're gonna hear it. I'm afraid right now to see what's gonna go on February 4th, right on Ford Road when Raising Cane's opens. I'm kind of afraid. So I think the key here is it's February 4th. It is. That's the day. So mark it on your calendars, my friends. But I think what we're saying is when you start to really go and come to 35 square miles of a township, not big city Detroit development, there may not be this triangulated state, county, and city deal where they're going to be able to do traffic improvements right away. We're out county. We're going to get, even though the engineering building is right down Michigan Avenue, it's right there. He's not here tonight. He's not here to hear all these things that are going on. So I think there should be an expectation of this level of scrutiny from us, especially on the traffic side, because we don't know what's going to happen. Kudos to you and the team for stepping up to do the infrastructure improvements in some way, shape, or form as it relates to the traffic stuff. But I think it's still going to be key. Even if we were to agree to do this tonight, there's still going to be a specter of us being able to do developments like this and not know what's going to happen on the other side of the wall. Not unique, but it's troublesome for us here in this particular commission because it happens all up and down Ford Road. So I say all of this to say this. I'm happy that you've come with this development. We don't know what it's going to be with respect to traffic on the other side, 275. It's kind of like Star Trek, the final frontier for us, I think. Am I right?
Let's hope it's not final.
Well, exactly. Thank you so much. But I think it's key for the developer to understand that this level of scrutiny needs to happen. Whether you're frustrated or not about, hey, you guys will keep telling us about this traffic, this, that, and the other, it's going to continue. So the next development you bring back is going to be this and much, much more. Because we need to understand how this fits into the fabric of our community where we live. If I lived at the Albert in Capitol Park, I'd be saying the same thing. If I lived down Woodward near your headquarters, I'd be saying the same thing. So I don't want you to get frustrated with the process, but I want you to understand that it's going to be this level of scrutiny and more. Even going back to look at this one as it maybe advances beyond today, to understand how this really, really fits in our community. Thanks so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I have nothing to add. I think we've asked all the questions that I can think of. So thank you.
We thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. So commission, what do we want to do? Based on all this. Feel like we have enough information to approve, or should we ask for more?
I don't know what more we can ask. I mean,
Yeah.
other than, and like we said, the one thing that I think we want, we can't get because the way the process is.
That would be traffic, promises of traffic management. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Foster, would you like to add anything? You've been late, but we still want to know what you have to say.
An hour earlier than usual. We shouldn't
Yes.
have texted you, sorry.
My question is, so when Doug said what, you can't get what you want, what, are you talking about the entrance to the facility, a different one, or?
No, information from Wayne County.
Okay, yeah. I did have a chance to look like Commissioner Watkins, I'm not as concerned about what happens on Ford Road February 4th with Raising Cane's. And that's mostly because even if something does happen on February 4th, it's very temporary. It's not, this is going to be what it is long-term. I think it may be what it is just because everyone's excited we have this new place on Ford Road. But I don't think it's a long-lasting thing. I think it's a very good thing for the township to have this entertainment complex. I think it's a huge place that we're expanding on Ford Road past 275. I think that helps traffic mitigation on the west side of 275. So I don't necessarily have any questions.
You.
I've
make-
got, I
I'll-
mean, I just want to put my 2 cents in. I've got no issue approving this. It's basically the same plan that we've seen. The developer's done everything that he can. Canton Township is following up with Wayne County. Those are the assurances we have, and I think that's the best we can do. So I'm comfortable moving forward with it.
I'll make a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I move to recommend approval of the final PDD application, site plan application, preliminary condominium application, number 047 PDQ 8237, number 047 SPC 8242, and number 047 SPP 8241, subject to the following conditions. 1, updating the tree woodland site assessment from
I think that might be form.
is that
Is
a
that a typo?
typo?
Yeah, I think it's form. We'll fix that.
Updating the tree woodland site assessment based on the relocation of the golf facility and removal of the hotel, including updated calculations on removed landmark trees. 2, revising the PDD agreement to address items noted by staff, including signage conditions, Warren Road sidewalk terms, loading space provisions for the Chick-fil-A and Portillo sites. 3, revising the dumpster enclosure plans for Portillo's and the multi-tenant commercial building to comply with section 2.14 of the zoning ordinance. And 4, deferring final action on the master deed and bylaws to final site condominium review, including addressing staff's concerns.
Madam Chair, I'll support.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by Commissioner Watkins. Any further discussion? All right, could Commissioner Eggenberger please call the vote?
Sure. Commissioner Cruz?
Yes.
Commissioner Eggenberger? Yes. Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Janowski? Yes. Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Watkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber?
Yes.
And Chairperson Zuber?
Yes, motion carries. We wish you all the best.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I came off as frustrated at all. It's been a long process. We really appreciate you guys accommodating us tonight. It was very, very important that this happened tonight. And again, thank you guys all for your time, your healthy questions, and we'll do what we can.
Thank you. We understand your frustration, believe me. Thank you. We understand your frustration. We do. Thank you very much. All right. The next item on our agenda is zoning ordinance discussion regarding tree and woodland preservation. Patrick, are you going to tell us more about that, or is this Aaron?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, so so the last few meetings, we've talked about the tree and woodland preservation ordinance and gone through where we started and how it's been progressing. And so in our cover memo, we had noted we had met in August, September, October, and December about the ordinance. And as we've gone through, we've made a lot of progress, and we've covered all of the sections except for the section on the mitigation. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to leave the mitigation standards for the end. We wanted to cover all the other standards and have familiarity with the ordinance so that, any questions that we had or things we can go back to are things that we've covered. And it's a long ordinance, so it's given us time to introduce it and go section by section, and to give us time to think about some of the discussions that we've had. And so after this meeting, we'll be coming back with more information. We're not yet ready to schedule a public hearing. There's more that we'll want to do on the section that we talk about tonight, as well as following up on some of the previous items that we've had come up on other sections that we've covered. So with the section on mitigation, this is probably the biggest section in terms of impact. It's the section that people want to know the most about. And it's the section that is the reason why we're mostly here. There are many areas of the tree and woodland ordinance that have needed to be updated, but the mitigation standards based on our court process has led us back to having to amend the ordinance to deal with mitigation and to deal with individualized assessments of sites. And our proposed ordinance does that and more. What we've wanted to do with the mitigation standards is we want to present options to applicants. If we had an individualized assessment and a very detailed assessment for each tree and woodland permit, that wouldn't really be applicable to a lot of smaller projects that would take a lot of time and a lot of expenditure to do a detailed individualized assessment where something on a smaller basis could be a better fit. So what we wanted to do in our ordinance is present options and allow owners and businesses and developers options in terms of what's the best fit for tree mitigation. And so far we've come through with 5 different options, and the fifth option is more towards the individualized assessment mitigation, where we really look at the environmental and the health impacts of trees and actually quantifying that. It's actually quite detailed, but there is a way to do that, to look at the benefits that trees provide and how we can mitigate those impacts for the environmental damage that's lost, or the environmental damage that happens when those trees are lost. So we'll probably spend the most time talking about option number 5, but I wanted to go through the first 4 options first, because these are going to be the options that people will choose the most often. So first off, in option 1, so just to back up a little bit, suppose someone is removing trees, and based on the formula, they have to do tree mitigation. And the proposed ordinance, it has different types of trees that are exempt. So trees that are dying, trees that are poor, trees that are on the exempt species list, trees that may be within a drain easement or a utility easement. A lot of those types of activities are exempt. And we wanted to exempt those in a separate section of the ordinance, because if there's a tree that's a health hazard, a safety hazard, something that's dead or dying, or a species that's invasive or not desired, we just wanted to exempt those and not have this type of mitigation. There still may be permitting or a permission process through the township, but not mitigation for anything that's exempt. So this mitigation is just dealing with protected trees or landmark trees that are removed, and now that they're removed, the applicant has to do mitigation. In option 1, it is mitigation by planting trees. This option is similar to the current replacement standard in the ordinance. And in the current proposal, the replacement trees would be 2 inches instead of 3 inches or 4 inches. And going with a smaller tree, it's not to give more relief to an applicant. It's that planting a 2-inch tree oftentimes has a better survival rate. If there's a smaller tree, it has time to adapt. It's more adaptable than if it's a 4-inch tree and it's planted. Sometimes those trees struggle to take hold in their new environment. So the developers that we talk to, most of the big developments, when a developer comes in and has to do tree mitigation, and some of the larger ones that you probably would know of based on the site plans that we review. We've talked to some of those developers about the tree ordinance, and one of their concerns that they've expressed is, can we still have the option to replant trees? Because with large developments, if there's land area to replant trees, a lot of developers are just happy to replant trees that are removed. They can put that into their project. They can put it on the site plan. They can budget for it. It's very predictable for them, and it's very mathematical. So most of the time, people will choose option one. They'll have a formula. They have to put in X number of trees. They'll plant it on the site, and that'll just be part of the landscape plan. So most of the process is probably not going to change in terms of mitigation. A couple of the changes will allow for smaller trees, and that'll have more benefits in terms of survival of the trees and the environmental benefits of those trees having a better chance of surviving. Another item that we added is that an applicant would be able to use new trees planted as part of a site plan to offset trees removed from a site. And right now, our ordinance doesn't do that. Our ordinance is if you remove a certain number of trees, let's say if there's 100 protected trees and they're removed, currently the ordinance allows 25% of protected trees to be removed without replacement. So if there are 100 protected trees right now, you could remove 25 without mitigation, and then the other 75, you'd have to plant 75 trees. And that's in addition to the landscape requirements where you already have to plant trees for your frontage and your parking lot and your stormwater and your street trees and general site areas and building foundation. So there's a lot of areas in our landscape ordinance where people already have to plant trees. And what we wanted to do is that if there's a large site and they're planting hundreds or in some cases thousands of trees, we wanted to allow a credit for those new trees that are planted. So one of the examples that we would see is that if a developer does the development and has to do a stormwater pond, and to do the stormwater pond, they have to remove 50 trees. And they dig the pond, they remove the 50 trees. In our landscape ordinance, we have landscaping requirements for ponds where the developer has to plant several trees around the pond. So if a developer removes 50 trees to do a stormwater pond, but ends up having to plant 50 trees based on our landscape requirements in a separate article of the ordinance, that would give the developer credit for the mitigation. In other words, the developer wouldn't have to plant twice as many trees or to do tree replacement for areas where they already have to plant trees. So there would be a credit factor where if a developer cuts down a few hundred trees, but they're planting, several hundred trees or over 1,000 trees, that they're getting credit because they're removing trees to do a development, but then they're putting the trees back through our landscape standards. Option 2 is the exact same as option 1, except it allows the trees to be planted on township property. And so in some cases, if the development site isn't conducive to more trees being planted, but the developer still has to do mitigation, option 2 would be you still have to do the same number of trees, but if you want to plant them on township property, we can facilitate that if we have a woodland plan or if we have parks where we want to plant trees, and we're always looking for more trees in many of our parks. So if a developer wanted to plant on township property instead of on the site, we could facilitate as an option, and it would have to be a mutual option between the township and the applicant. Option 3 is a new option, and this is an option that would allow for planting in a homeowners association common area. This one's a little bit more complex because it would require an HOA to agree to receive the tree and agree for maintenance and, if necessary, replacement of a tree. But we have several hundred homeowners associations in the community. Some of them have expressed interest in, if there's a program to allow for more trees in their common areas, that they would be willing to host that. And so, again, it takes facilitation between a developer, the township, and an HOA, but we wanted to include that as an option because if that did work out between all three parties, we wanted to allow that option to be viable where we could see more tree planting, but in a different area that's typically a larger open space area. Option 4 is a proportionate payment into the township tree fund. So this was the subject of some of the litigation from a few years ago in terms of the calculation for payment into the tree fund. So we understand the challenges of having that, but we wanted to include it as an option because sometimes developers want to opt for that, but we don't include it as the first option. So if someone's cutting down trees, we're not trying to promote that as the first option. When we talk to developers, even before the outcome of the litigation, we would tell them, our first preference is replant the trees on the site. If you took a tree from the site, we want you to see if you can replant the tree on the site. If not, we'd like to see a tree planted somewhere else. And if there's a payment in the tree fund because the other options don't work, then that's an option. And we want to keep it as an option, but we're not going to promote it as anything that we favor as the first option when there are other viable options for getting the trees planted. But we do want to include this as an option because some developers may opt to it. It may be cleaner for them where they don't have to facilitate landscaping or planting. So we do put this in as an option, but we have some caps. One of them is that there's a maximum payment that's capped at 50% of the land value of the parcel in which the protected or the landmark trees are removed. So if it's a woodland and there's a calculation based on number of trees, we want to tie the maximum number of mitigation trees and expense to the value of the land and capping it as a percentage, just so that there's a ceiling on how much potential mitigation there could be. And then finally, the fifth option is to do an individualized mitigation calculation. And there's many ways to do that. And we include an example in the draft ordinance where we have some protected land that has recently been classified as a nature preserve by Canton Township. And it's on the east side of Morton Taylor Road, north of Michigan Avenue. And we did a computer analysis with iTree. It's a free software that can be used to analyze the benefits of trees. And there's a number of different ways that the software can be run. And in this case, we did what was called iTree Canopy for this 27-acre piece. And what we wanted to do is just look at it as an example. And this was before we really used this as part of the tree ordinance. When it was in the process of being a nature preserve, we looked at it just to see what the environmental benefits of having this piece of property and having it as a woodland and what is that doing for the community. So we ran that through the software. It was fairly straightforward. The computer software is just basically allows us to put in a series of points on the property and classify it. And what it does is it allows a calculation based on the air quality benefits, water quality benefits, and pollutant sequestration benefits. And so I won't go through all the different numbers that it generated, but based on the 27-acre parcel, we were able to generate quantifiable benefits in terms of carbon dioxide sequestration, air pollution that's removed, and the hydrological benefits, both stormwater runoff, evaporation, how much water is intercepted and not running off. And we also have the detailed analysis that goes with the software where it generates an associated cost for the type of cost that it's saving the community, both in environmental benefits and health benefits. So this is something that's really interesting, and I think something that we can use both on a large scale when we're looking at large woodland areas, as well as a small scale where we're looking at the individual benefits that certain trees will provide. It's an option that does take time to do. It's not an exact science, but it gets us through a formula where we're able to generate either numbers of trees or certain benefits if we're looking at however many gallons of stormwater that are being retained in a woodland. We can associate that with what a potential mitigation could be. So this 27-acre woodland, there's almost 96,000 gallons of avoided runoff every year. If that woodland were to go away and we had to find out how to mitigate 96,000 gallons, we don't exactly say in the ordinance how someone must do it, but it's something that gives us a way forward to say, are we going to make them do a pond or develop a wetland or plant a series of trees where over time they'll be able to handle some, if not all, of that runoff there. So we haven't gone through an analysis of looking at mitigation, plugging in trees to see what that could look like in this instance, but we do have something in our ordinance that we propose where there are certain mitigation efforts that have to be achieved based on a certain number of years in the future. So if someone were to cut down trees or a woodland and they have to offset these benefits, in the mitigation part of the zoning ordinance that we propose, the projected mitigation would have to be within a number of years. So if they were going to replant the woodland, they don't have to replace all those benefits in 1 year. That would be impossible with replanting. But there's a period of, I think, 10 to 15 years, depending on what's removed, where based on the species and the size of the tree and the projected growth rate, they would have to fulfill all those benefits. So it would be a little bit of projection on the front end, but it is something that is quantifiable. It is something that is tied to the environmental and the public health impacts of the tree removal. And when we get into mitigation and look at the individualized assessment, this is exactly what we're looking at in terms of going all the way back to the purpose and intent statement of what are the benefits that trees give us, why are trees important, all the way down to quantifying this is what the trees are doing for us. That's what they've been doing for a number of years. And if we lose that and we want to mitigate that, then there's a way that we can do that based on a number of trees that we plant or other mitigating factors. So this gets us to the next step in terms of looking at this individualized assessment and looking at a method. We didn't know exactly where we would end up with when we started this process, but there's a lot of great softwares that are out there that have tried to achieve just that, to show how trees help us and how we can mitigate their loss with planting or other types of things that we can do. So at that point, I'll end the discussion there in terms of going through some of those 5 options. Then I can kind of go over to the ordinance itself to show the quantifiable benefits and the number of years there. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. This ends our overall presentation of the ordinance, but there are things that we have to do going forward in terms of giving other examples of mitigation, looking at other scenarios in terms of exemptions for numbers of trees and acres, because we had that discussion earlier. We haven't filled in some of those blanks in the ordinance. It's from a different section, but we'll be coming back in the future with some scenario planning and a decision tree in terms of if we have certain number of trees or certain number of acres that can be removed each year that are exempt. So we will have that discussion in the future. We just don't have anything in that separate section now. But for the purpose of mitigation, this is where we are in terms of the proposed options. And I'll be happy to take any questions or comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes, of course.
I want to, we happened to have a HOA meeting yesterday, and this came up. It came up because of, we've done some interesting things in our HOA. We've taken on a, what's called a biopod system for our retention ponds. And what it actually does, it injects, these pods go out, and they inject bacteria, and it kind of eats the muck from the bottom, and they come back into them recharged. So they do that all summer. We had them taken out. But one of the things that I'm picking up, and this is the reason I'm asking the question, there are trees that are around the pond that actually contribute to the muck. And there is fertilizer. When you spread fertilizer, it contributes to the muck over time. So you're building this muck at the bottom of your ponds that you got to either dredge or you use a system where you slowly take it out, which is what we went to. So one of the questions was, I want to know, because then we started thinking, well, if we're doing something to improve our environment, meaning we got ponds that are active with live fish and, you know, it's really thriving, it's aerated, all that stuff, do we have to put a tree back? You know, that's where I'm at. I'm saying, would it be beneficial if you're improving in other areas that you would allow someone to take trees out because they don't help in that case? They actually hurt. The leaves fall in, they disintegrate, it goes, and that's part of the muck, and fertilizer is the other big one. So finding that out, those were some of the questions that came up, and I said, you know, that would be a valid argument. Now that you're putting this out here, it's making me think, is this something that, actually I'm asking an opinion on it, is this something that would be valid to kind of help out? Because there's some trees we don't want to put back, and some actually looks better with the tree gone. But overall, it improve the environment, for us, at least.
Yeah, so there are a number of different options. If it is a development that has a stormwater pond, Our ordinance requires that on the upland area, there be a certain number of trees around the pond for aesthetics and environmental benefits. In some cases, there could be certain tree species that are on the upland that are not appropriate, especially as they mature and if they drop things. And if there's an expert that goes out there and is working on the pond and says, well, you know, certain trees are a problem based on the species. There are a few different options. One could be if it's the tree species and you want to remove that and plant it with a species that's more appropriate, where at maturity it would still be okay with a pond. I don't know what the impact of leaf dropping would be, but that could be one option. Another option is you could go with an evergreen tree on the upland if that was conducive to being around a pond, and some evergreen species do well in those environments. If for some reason it was an area where the tree was required, but there just wasn't a location around the pond that fit the best, the Planning Commission can grant modifications from landscape requirements. And in cases where, like if it's a parking lot tree that can't fit in a parking lot, but it's otherwise required, typically what we would come to the Planning Commission with is still plant the tree, maybe not have to plant it in the parking lot, but plant it somewhere on the site just so that the net number of trees is what the ordinance requires, just in a different location. So if there was something that was area specific that was problematic and they wanted to replant the tree but outside of the stormwater area, we would probably suggest coming to the Planning Commission for a modification to allow that to be done. But we would study that with them and their expert just to make sure we go down that decision tree, no pun intended, to see what the options are and what worked best for that site itself.
Okay, all right.
I think you should intend that pun, actually, but.
But we still got to do the forms, so when we update the forms, we can have some
Okay.
fun with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
You were saying that, I like the options, how you're giving them options, but you as the planning department want to prioritize those options, correct?
Yeah, and I think we kind of do it by putting the option one first is replanting the trees. And the reason that's first is that's the most popular.
It's easiest.
Yeah, most of the time, developers large and small, a lot of times they don't object to the ordinance. They'll just say, well, how many trees do I have to plant? And if I can reasonably plant them on the site, then that's fine. Sometimes, location can be a challenge, expense can be a challenge, and with the number of exemptions that we have and the credit towards landscaping trees, I think it's going to be a lot easier for that on-site planting.
So my point is, I agree with you, but there needs to be some sort of language that gives you the power to choose that option in an order of priority or preference. For example, let's say I'm a developer and I say, you know what, I want to choose option 5 or whatever with this crazy calculation. And you're saying there's room on the site to plant. Well, now I'm fighting you on it. So I guess I'm just saying that we just need to make sure there's a mechanism for you to enforce the preference options. But I like the ideas. Yep.
Yeah, and there may be, in the ordinance, there may be some language we could look at in terms of, as a policy preference, to replant the tree from the area from which it was removed. And then kind of working back from that of, maybe not in the order necessarily that, option 3 is better than 4 or anything like that. But in general, replanting the tree on the site as being the preferred option, there's a rational basis for that.
Anybody else?
No, I was surprised you thought there'd be a lot of conversation, to be honest, but,
I counted myself.
oh, okay. Just don't have a whole lot to say about trees. I would like to say to thank you. Has no one ever else noticed this word that I have never heard of before? Maybe there's tree people here that have. Evapotranspiration?
Yeah.
Do we use that in our normal days?
I mean,
There we
I
go.
talk
Okay,
about it.
well,
Yeah. I was talking to my daughter about that.
were you just saying that? Like, oh, whoa, this is quite a word. Okay, well, there we go. Well, I don't use it. I'm gonna start.
You don't need action from us tonight, right, Patrick?
Not tonight. What we'll do at the next work session is if we have some other sites that we can do some analysis on, we'll do that. And then we do want to circle back to some other areas of the ordinance that we had to address. One of the areas early on in the ordinance that we left blank was under exemptions was allowing a certain number of trees to be removed on certain areas. Right now, any lot that is developed and under 2 acres is exempt. So what we're gonna prepare is some different lot sizes and some mapping just to show all the parcels that are less than 2 acres or less than quarter acre, half acre, because we're gonna have to fill this in exemptions in terms of allowing a certain number of trees from certain number of lot sizes to be removed each year as maybe not necessarily exempt, but permitted. So this is one of these unfinished parts of the ordinance that we've been meaning to circle back on towards the end of the review process. So I think we're just about there. We're ready to do that. So when we come back in February, we'll have more input there, some maps, and then a little bit more discussion.
I have a question about option 4, and I did not read the entire section of the draft ordinance, to be clear, but how do we define the land value of the parcel? Who gets to say what it's worth? I mean, is it the assessed value or the taxable value or what the person paid for it, or so many different ways?
So here's the section here up on the screen. And it's going to be based on the most recent land value assessment from
Okay.
the Canton Township
Thank you.
Assessor.
I should have looked, but I was having a lot of trouble. I crashed my software and I couldn't download the version, so forgive me. I finally did. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Shall we discuss the signage?
Sure. So this one, I'm going to be even more brief.
Oh, gosh. What will we do?
I promise. So similar to the tree and woodland preservation, we've gone through the sign ordinance through a number of different sections. And in October, we looked at the first 4 sections. And then in December, we came back and looked at 4 other sections. And so the next part of the ordinance, we're in subsection 9, so we're working through this at a pretty good pace. This next section, 6A.09, this is probably the most significant section, and that is the specific sign standards based on the sign type and the zoning district. So that's the section that most developers are going to go to, most businesses are going to go to in terms of what sign can I have based on what zoning district that I'm in. A lot of the sign standards are going to be the same. The ordinance itself will be a little bit more user-friendly and will have graphics and text that will help. Some of the changes that we're recommending to make within this section, the most significant changes are first, increasing the maximum size of ground signs from 24 square feet to 32 square feet, but keeping the maximum height the same. The maximum height for single-tenant ground signs is 6 feet. We wanted to keep that height the same because the visual impact, we didn't want to go above that for single-tenant signs. But sometimes we hear from businesses in the community that it's really hard to see their signs. And when we look at signs that are out there, the max square footage for commercial signs and industrial signs, but mostly commercial because of customer traffic, that maximum size of 24 square feet can be pretty restrictive. And when we take into account the speeds on the adjacent road, the distance from the curb to the actual lot line and the setback, lines of sight, landscaping. Sometimes the visibility of the signs can be pretty difficult, especially on faster roads and for traffic that may be unfamiliar. So we recommend increasing that a little bit more. So that additional area would be made up by widening the sign and not making the signs any higher. Another item that we want to recommend is decreasing the minimum front yard setback for ground signs. Right now, ground signs have to have a minimum front yard setback of 10 feet, and that's 10 feet from the front lot line, which is typically 1 foot off of the sidewalk. So if you think of in a front yard, you've got the sidewalk, and then you go 1 foot off the sidewalk, that's about where the front lot line is, and then go 10 feet back, that's the setback for the ground signs. So that gets down to a visibility issue. We recommend going as low as 3 feet. We might come back and recommend 5 feet, but something less than 10 feet. Currently, our multi-tenant signs, those large multi-tenant signs on Ford Road, the maximum front yard setback for those is 3 feet. So it's ironic that we have large multi-tenant signs that could be 3 feet from the front lot line, but if it's a single tenant sign, it's got to be 10 feet back. So I don't think 3 feet is necessarily a bad number. We would just want to look at, make sure we have minimum distances from driveways and clear vision triangles so that it doesn't obstruct visibility. So that's something we'll take another look at in terms of maybe getting some additional setbacks from driveways. But we think with a little bit larger area, but not higher heights, and then a little closer to the sidewalk will improve visibility for some of these signs and businesses without undermining any of the character that we're trying to uphold in our sign ordinance. The next item is increasing the maximum size of multi-tenant ground signs from 30 square feet to 42 square feet in the O1 and C1 districts, and from 42 square feet to 48 square feet in the C3 through the C4 districts, but keeping the maximum height at 8 feet. So those multi-tenant ground signs, not the large ones we see on Ford Road, but the other multi-tenant signs, the max height is 8 feet. We want to maintain that, but we want to allow for a little bit more area. And the reason for that is sometimes we hear from businesses and multi-tenant centers that there's not enough room on the signs for all their tenants. And this wouldn't necessarily guarantee that, but it would really open up a lot of opportunities for multi-tenant businesses to be able to advertise on signs, and allowing that larger area within those office and commercial districts would give a little bit more visibility, a little bit more opportunity for those multi-tenant signs to put identification signage out there. And then the last major change in the sign provisions are the temporary yard signs, regardless of the content of the sign itself. So, for example, in residential districts, the proposal is yard signs limited to 6 square feet per sign and 24 square feet total, and that yard signs be limited to 4 feet in height. So this would be a certain number of ground signs and area, regardless of the content, the time of year, so it would be content neutral. Because these standards are relatively new, in any community that does new sign ordinance, the yard signs are probably going to be the most talked about just because of potential impacts. So in general, the yard signs are also the most heavily regulated. In talking to our ordinance enforcement division, most of the issues with yard signs are in commercial districts. They're really not as much in the residential districts, because even at times when there's a lot of yard signs, like election season, after the election, those signs by and large come down. We have some provisions in the sign code for some additional signage allotments during certain times, like when a lot or a unit is for sale or lease, and during periods of elections. But that's something that we'll want to study more from a legal standpoint in terms of what the courts are saying about allowing for more signs in certain times of the year, like election seasons. There's always new federal case law with signs and ongoing cases. So, there may be something at either the federal level or in our federal district that we can use that can help our sign ordinance in that regard. But that's still something that we're exploring in terms of yard signage. So there will be more to come on that. So that concludes our review of the signage for what's proposed tonight for district signage. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Free for all? Commissioner Watkins?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Something? Okay. Anybody?
Patrick, have you had any feedback or ever received any comments from the business community about the sign ordinance, but like what they want to see, what they want to change? You know, I'm thinking like the chamber, the DDA, whatever. I'm just curious what some of the thoughts are about it.
Most of the conversations that we've had, kind of informally, some of them have been new developers when they propose a sign for all their tenants, and the sign is maybe a little bit larger than the ordinance allows. Sometimes there's a struggle there to either make those individual tenant signs smaller or exclude some tenants from a sign. We've had recently a variance application for a business on Ford Road that wanted a larger wall sign. And one of their reasons was that there's a multi-tenant sign out front, but there's not room for their particular business, so they wanted a larger wall sign. That didn't meet the standard of review to obtain a variance, but from a policy standpoint, in terms of can multi-tenant signs be a little bit bigger, so there's more of a chance that tenants can locate on those signs, that's something that we took into account when we worked on this ordinance. We've also looked at existing businesses and existing multi-tenant centers that are out there where they talk about if they can go larger with a sign, if they can build more signs. So in doing that, the ones that we have talked to, we've said, well, you know, this is what the ordinance says, and variances are hard to come by, but these are some things that we're looking to change in the ordinance to maybe make it better long-term. I don't know of any businesses that are waiting necessarily on the ordinance to be adopted to do a project, but the ones that we've talked to about prospectively what we're looking to do, anything that makes it better, we've received favorable comments on, but nothing where we've taken a poll or we've had any kind of focus groups.
Maybe the better way to phrase my question is, given our existing ordinance, do you get a lot of pushback from developers/businesses about what they can and can't put up?
Sometimes it's specific based on like color contrasting, you know, especially if they've got like a certain brand. But because our sign ordinance has been in effect for so long, I think it may be close to 20 years we've had this sign ordinance. I don't think we're hearing as much as we probably heard the first few years of having the ordinance.
All right, thank you.
May I? Well, I know what you were talking about. That came before the BZA, the zoning appeal. But one of the things is that we picked up, right, was a company was bought out, and they wanted to change the logo to fit what they wanted to do, which is why the change was there. I think the owner was okay, but he was trying to comply, and they had been bought out, and they wanted to put their personal brand on it, which meant it had to be bigger. So, yeah, that's interesting. When you get buyouts, things like that happen. But, yeah, so that's about as much as you get. But we couldn't help them.
Well, there was that one development that was going in, and I remember, I don't know if it started yet, but it was the gated community. Do you guys remember that one? And they wanted to make their sign bigger than what was allowed. I don't know if they've done it yet, or if we change this, if they'll come back, and I know that was a modification they wanted.
Yeah, and they ended up complying with it because with a residential community or an apartment community, the demand for more signage is really not as high as, you know, commercial business where, you know, the sign is pretty critical to site identification and promotion.
I think it was like 3 sides on their community house, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
I think we all were like, yeah, I remember.
Okay, I remember what you're talking about now.
Right near Ford and Lots.
Yes, that's right.
Gosh,
Where
I
all the
wonder if they'll
traffic
bring any
is, right?
traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
Yes.
fine. It'll all be fine.
yeah.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
I have a question
Tell
about
us
the
not.
temporary. Anything about timing? Because I noticed, like, just for example, on the election sign,
Lazy. That's
and
lazy.
I
They didn't
just
pay anybody to
wonder
get rid of them.
if you could, I know there's supposed to be a limit on timing, like they're supposed to be pulled up. I just wondered if there's anything in the ordinance.
With what we have now, it's it's a little bit more difficult because it addresses political signs as part of content. And we're not able to do that in the proposed ordinance in terms of identifying and regulating a sign based on the content. What we've looked at is to see if there's additional signage allowed within periods of elections, where it doesn't say what you can put on the sign, but it recognizes that there are certain times a year where people want to be more expressive with temporary signage. With that taken out, what we have is a certain number of yard signs anytime per year. So if there's someone who wants to leave out a political sign and it's otherwise compliant, where it's not fading or rusting or anything like that, or someone advertising, a team that their kid plays for, or any other reason someone would have a sign in their yard, we would just look at it based on number of signs, square footage, height, that sort of thing. So if someone were to leave a sign out past an election just because they wanted to, the way that it's drafted is as long as they're compliant with the area requirements and that the sign is kept in good shape, they would be able to leave it out there within those restrictions.
I didn't necessarily mean like
Corners.
the corners.
Yeah.
And I know, like, as a candidate, I get a letter in the mail from the ordinance department at the beginning of the election season. It says, you have this long to keep your signs up. If you don't take them down, you will be fined. And I don't think that that's really
Yeah, if it's in a road right of way, like right at the corner in the road right of way, then that's prohibited. Those should be up anyway. And in those yard signs, we're looking at we're focusing more on the residential districts of allowing more yard signage and not the commercial districts, because if it were the commercial districts, we would see a proliferation of yard signs regardless of election season, of just advertising. So if every parcel was able to have a couple of yard signs, the whole corridor would be filled with yard signs. So on yard signs, we're much more restrictive in our commercial areas because we want to allow more monument sign area as their primary means of advertising from the road and being more restrictive with the yard signs there. So if it's at the corner of a commercial area, I think we could probably enforce it saying no yard signs allowed regardless of the content. Would have to come up.
Well, I don't think you're saying no yard signs in those areas. You're just saying, just get them out within a reasonable period of time, whether, even if it's 30 days, at least they're gone. I mean, and I know what you mean. I mean, you drive around, you see election signs that are still sitting there a year after the fact.
There's some in front of the gas station at Canton Center and Cherry Hill. There's two political yard signs still there, so.
It's not a lot, but they look crappy after a while, and
Yeah.
it's and I think, to your point, Patrick, it sounds to me like it's more of a matter of enforcement than it is of having to tweak the ordinance anymore.
Yeah, in that case, maybe it's just, a reminder from ordinance that, the yard signs have to be up.
I mean, if Summer's getting that letter at the beginning of her campaign cycle, if they're sending it out, then to me, that says that is an enforcement problem. There's obviously a mechanism in place for them to have to pull those signs up, but then enforce it.
Yeah, we can ask our ordinance division about that.
Anything else? All right, let's move on to wireless telecommunications. Patrick?
Thank you. So this one we've been at for a while, and the ordinance that we have presented this evening is relatively new, and what we've wanted to do is to draft an ordinance that was something that was fairly straightforward, nothing that was outside of what a lot of communities have adopted. And one of the reasons is that we've got some really old wireless telecommunication standards in our ordinance right now. And they should have been updated many, many years ago, if for no other reason to just acknowledge changes to state law, modern technology, with the most difficult parts being where in the township we would allow them. So there is a part for that, but we, at the very least, want to update it based on requirements of state law, technology, and certain application protocols that we have to follow. Last month, when we brought the first part to the ordinance, we tried to put in some things about the small cell law that went into effect in 2018 or 2019. And I think we can still do that, but to do that, we would have to make some other adjustments to a separate telecommunications ordinance that's in our general code of ordinances. So in a future version of this, we may see some language put back in that deals with small cells, but I didn't want to put it in, leave it in if it was undone in another part of the code of ordinances. So for the draft that is on the agenda tonight, I just left it as just wireless towers, wireless communication facilities. So we've looked at this in the previous meeting. We looked at the purpose and the intent in the general definitions, and now we're at the point where we've prepared an ordinance. It's similar to a lot of municipal ordinances that are out there, but there's not one standard. There's not one boilerplate. There's not one way to do it, and many communities are going to want to do it different. What we wanted to do is start with the outline that we had presented last month and kind of build out from there and filled in with different standards that we want to propose in terms of the wireless types of activities. So right now, we start with categorizing the permitted activities. We have categories A, B, and C. A being the easiest, where there might be some co-location. It's something that's administratively approved. And a lot of those standards come directly from state law. The Michigan Zoning Enabling Act was amended in 2012 to address wireless telecommunications. And it put some rules in there in terms of what communities could and couldn't do. That includes some procedures. So many of the things that are in the draft ordinance regarding procedures, those are requirements verbatim from state law. So in this category A, where there's increases in the compound area, increases in the tower, co-locations, those are all things that the state law says that we have to allow, we have to provide for administratively. The category B are types of activities that fall under special land use review because they don't fall under something that's administratively approved through state law. This is also a class of uses that is mentioned in state law. And then finally, category C is basically new towers or major changes that require special land use review. Those are also provided for in state law. So this category A, B, and C, it's a very simplified way of putting all those requirements of state law and best practices and putting them into three pretty easy to determine paths based on the activity. One thing we left out was a potential category D, which is something that we want to discuss both at the Planning Commission level and internally of whether we want to have a separate classification for wireless towers on municipal property. And a couple of reasons for that is there may be municipal property that's not within the zones that are specified in the draft ordinance, but are otherwise ideal locations for towers. And one of the reasons could be it's ideal because of potential public use, whether it's a public safety use or a public utility use for having public communications equipment on that tower in the location. So that's something that we want to look at as a possible category where if it's on a tower on municipal property, whether we want to have it as a permitted use, still required to have site plan review, but not a special land use like it would be elsewhere in the ordinance. So that's something that we want to have more discussion on that allows for some more options, that allows for potential benefits to public safety and public utilities and public service by having tower locations on municipal property, because a lot of those uses come from at the municipal level, whether it's public safety radio equipment or anything that's related to 911 or related to public utilities. So we'll continue to have those discussions. We put in here in the ordinance some review procedures. A lot of the procedures and the timelines, those are required by state law. And then finally, in subsection 5, we have development standards. And those development standards relate to the zoning districts, setbacks, enclosures, tower and building height, landscaping, et cetera. And so I won't go through each and every one of those, but the most significant is we include some zoning districts where towers are subject to special land use review. Currently, the only areas where a tower is permitted is in the light industrial and the general industrial districts, which are essentially along Michigan Avenue and in the northeast part of the community. That leaves a lot of the community far away from the nearest tower. Very difficult to get service to a lot of areas of the community based on some of the zoning restrictions and the districts, and we recognize that. So what we propose in the ordinance is additional zoning districts where it would still be a special land use, which means there would be a public hearing, there would be public notice to everyone within 300 feet, and there would be publication in the newspaper of a public hearing. So those special land uses would be required to have hearings. So we propose towers as special land uses in the rural agricultural district, the residential estate, the rural residential, and the R1 district. All of those districts have minimum lot sizes of at least 1 acre, and they tend to be our more rural districts. We also recommend including the light industrial research district as a special land use. There's some areas in the community that are zoned light industrial research that could open up some potential new areas for towers and for coverage. Right now, we don't have anything in the R2 through R5 or the multifamily housing district, which are more dense residential districts. We don't currently have anything in any of the commercial districts. We can add those. We can modify these however we want to throughout the process, but we wanted to just start somewhere and to put more options on the table there so that we could talk about them, see what we wanted to know more about, and come back later with any revisions. And then the rest of the items that we have in there are pretty typical development standards, just in terms of how the tower would look. And then finally, we have a couple of provisions on compliance with federal, state, county, and township standards, some maintenance and repair provisions, and some removal provisions if it's unused, obsolete, or abandoned. So that concludes our introduction of the full ordinance. There's a lot there, so we've probably have at least 1 or 2 meetings of going through different standards until I think we're ready to set a public hearing. But this is at least a start with getting some other districts, getting some procedures, and some development standards, so that as we move forward, for those that are following this, and there are some wireless companies that are following it, this at least gives them something. An indication of what we're working on, what we're trending towards, and as they look at this, if they have any comments from the industry or anyone in the public, now's a good time to have that dialogue and to hear from them. So that concludes our staff report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Our resident technology expert. Do you have any thoughts? Wireless tower.
Obviously, I've talked to Patrick quite a bit about this. I think we're heading down the right path. To kind of piggyback on something he said earlier about why we need to maybe change the ordinance or update it, whatever terminology you want to use. Technology has changed, and people's reliance on it has increased greatly.
Absolutely.
And when this ordinance first came into being, making towers a permitted use in industrial areas only was pretty common. And that worked for when the industry was still new. But now with so much emphasis on wireless technology and all the devices that people have both in their home and that they carry with them, having coverage or service, whatever word you want to use, all over the place has become a necessity. And the way our ordinance is structured right now, we can't accommodate those needs. I personally like the idea a lot of putting out there that a tower can be a permitted use on municipal property, subject to a number of conditions, of course, development standards, which could be hammered out. I also like the idea of making a special land use in the other areas of the township that aren't residential. I'm not the only facilities that I'm okay with in a like a single-family residential area are like a small cell. They can be put in the right of way. And those are almost a different animal than when we're talking about a tower or something of that nature. Patrick, I want to ask a question. You said something during your presentation. You said that there's nothing in commercial areas. Did you mean in this ordinance, or did you mean right now?
In the ordinance.
Okay, I thought you meant physically, because I'm thinking.
Oh, no,
we've
there
got-
is right now.
Because we've
and-
got rooftop stuff on in commercial districts.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I didn't forget about when we put this together, and the commercial districts are not named. We can always add them, or we can put provisions if we want to allow for the rooftop on commercial. Right now, it seems like they're there out of necessity because there's really nowhere else to go, so they look at the rooftop. But with the tower option, I don't know if the rooftop would be necessary, but we can always add districts as we go through.
I just wanted to, I wasn't sure what you were referring to when you said that. But that's kind of my 2 cents worth at the 10,000-foot level, so.
Just one question, is there, knowing the industry, are there optimal locations that you can identify in a township? Like, I'll give you an example. There was the tower that they put on the senior tower. I never noticed any of this stuff until they mentioned it. And I look up there, I say, man, there's all the towers up there. Well, the reason is it's the tallest building in that particular area. And the seniors are okay with it, I guess. But my point is, I guess that's a nice way to subsidize a building, right? But I'm just saying, are there ways of identifying optimal locations, like ahead of time? To like get ahead of where?
I don't know about ahead of time.
That's an expert thing. I
It's
don't
more,
know.
it's more of a, I don't want to call it demand, but it really depends where the people are. I mean, like, and I'll tell Pat, I'll say this, the place that we have a lot of people looking right now for a tower is the southwest part of the township. There's nothing down there as far as wireless. There is across the township line, there's a tower in Superior Township on the other side of Ridge Road. There's one down on, what is that? Is that Mott? That's down there in Van Buren, just after Denton. But there's nothing like covering Cherry Hill Village or those neighborhoods over there. But with the time when this ordinance came into place, those neighborhoods weren't there.
We're planners.
We are.
We should know this stuff.
But you're right. And to a certain degree, that follows. The wireless carriers, they do look and see where development's going and seeing what kind of activity is going on. So I'm not gonna say that planning doesn't happen, but the way they prioritize as far as when they actually do something ends up being more of a demand-driven issue. Like,
I got that. Right,
So-
but you're right. But being that we have, have plans.
Well, you can
and we are
I think
planners, we kind of could
yeah.
spot some areas.
well,
that
I
we
think
grow.
logic can tell you, you can just see trends in a community. You can kind of get an idea, yeah, they're probably gonna need something there at some point.
Right.
I mean, again, that's why I think the idea of using municipal land is attractive, because there's municipal land all over the township. They should always be able to find something that'll work.
Option D, right?
Yeah, we didn't write it out, but we had in the comment margin where an option D if we had provisions for municipal land. So I think we just wanted to discuss with the planning commission and internally, and something we can explore. We can come up with some draft text the next meeting to just talk about that. And looking at development standards, we may want to look at different development standards. If they're going to be on municipal land, maybe we look at setbacks or things like that.
Good.
Is this the time where I can ask Patrick if we really are meeting?
And
What?
That's how I felt when I saw it on my calendar.
yeah,
Oh, that's right.
Monday's the
That's the
first.
first
We're a month,
Monday.
we're a week behind.
Yeah.
Because of the
We are meeting?
holidays.
So are we meeting?
February 3rd? We are?
We are meeting next Monday on the 3rd.
Back
It'll
to
be at-
back.
It'll be at 7 PM.
Okay.
And we'll have,
Did pay for that?
pardon?
We did approve the calendar last
I
month.
know,
Yeah, we did it
did.
to ourselves.
So,
Yeah, I think this was the only unusual month because of the way that the holidays stacked up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we don't meet again until the 24th?
Yep, because President's Day will move the work session, so,
Then we'll have another 2 weeks.
That's right.
okay. Forgot about that, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it'll
And
be
then
really
again
nice
on-
to see you all
It will
again.
be great to see you, and I will be on time for the meeting.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Brian thinks we're getting too far off task.
We're going into the
Did,
weeds.
did Raising Cane's open today?
Wait,
No, the 4th.
February 4th.
No, they're
We have
gonna
a-
have a
I know,
soft
I know,
opening.
is that what it was, a soft open? Because there's
Yeah.
cars in the drive-through.
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah,
We
I
have
think
a-
it's gonna be the 3rd.
Fourth, there's
fourth.
a ribbon cutting.
Fourth.
No,
fourth.
Ribbon
I got
cutting
a
is
thing
the
from the
4th.
chamber.
Yeah.
before
That's the 4th.
fourth.
It's
Yeah,
the
that's the
4th.
ribbon cutting, it's a
No,
fourth.
it's,
You sure?
Do we-
I got an
we have a
email.
I'm not sure
motion.
it's the 4th.
Wait,
support.
we have a motion and support on the floor. We have a motion by Commissioner Watkins and support by Commissioner Lee to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, we're
I got
adjourned.
that email too from the chamber. I thought it said.